Welcome to another episode of the Left of Lansing podcast with Pat Johnston. A progressive insight into Michigan's political and cultural world. And of course, an entertaining podcast designed to shine a light on how to make Michigan's political machine work for the people. Now, from the Left of Lansing headquarters, located in his attic, here's the award-winning Pat Johnston.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the final installment of the 2024 version of Michigan's premier progressive podcast. I am Pat Johnston, and I just wanted to first say thank you for listening this entire year, and thanks to many of you for sending your kind comments as well. Now, you see, I'm not getting any corporate funding, and I don't have Daddy Warbucks to give me staff and help me produce an episode week in and week out. I am basically a one-show person, or a one-person show, literally. Now, like I said on last week's show with the American Prospect's David Dayen, and please go back and listen to our discussion on the power that's yielded by corporate lobbyists in Lansing. It's a great episode. But as I said last week, I've gotten help from a handful of people, to be sure. From my technical advisor wife, Heather, to show voice Jessica, to logo producer Kirsten, and to leftoflansing.com consultant Rich. Without their help, I'm not sure how this would all look. But still, Jessica's not making it up when she says at the end of each episode how I am the producer, writer, researcher, and host of this whole project. And that takes up a lot of time. It really does take up a lot of time to do, as many of you fellow podcasters know all too well. Yet, there's nothing more I love doing professionally. And being in the mix of the political world in Michigan is something I've enjoyed doing over the last 25 years or so. Actually, publishing and pushing progressive content throughout the state of Michigan and across the country is something that I really do enjoy. And after a few weeks off here for the holidays, I'll be back and ready to go, since we will have MAGA Republicans holding the majority in the State House, as they'll be ready to unleash whatever radical insanity they've got up their sleeves. And of course, we will have a new Congress in D.C. And yes, dear Leader Trump will regain the White House in about a month. There will be lots to cover, lots to discuss, and that's what I plan on doing. I do want to say that I host a progressive show because I am, yes, a progressive. As you've probably been able to surmise ever since the election, while I consider the fascist movement that is MAGA Republicanism backed by powerful corporate interest and also backed by a repressive white Christian nationalist movement, I will not just hold my disdain or criticisms for Trump and the Republicans. Don't worry, I will do that week in and week out. Naturally, they will take up a lot of my time, as I will do my best to highlight those throughout the state who are fighting every day to stop the spread of MAGA Republicanism throughout Michigan. However, when Democrats are doing wrong, and wrong as I see it, be it on policy or on messaging, I will call them out. And I've pretty much been doing that ever since I started this whole project. This whole thing is about messaging, all right? That is one reason why I wanted to start this whole thing. We can't get our messages across on terrestrial radio, which is corporate back radio. So we move on to podcasting, to independent media. And when Democrats aren't doing a very good job at messaging, I'm here to call them out on it and to find others who are on the front lines who are trying to change that. Look, I'm on Team Democracy, and I'm also on Team Progressive. Acting MAGA light or Republican light has never gotten this country anywhere. We must fight for real progressive values, be they economic and be they on the social justice realm. We must fight as hard as we can for those who cannot afford lobbyists in Lansing and who find it difficult to pay the bills, as we would also fight hard for those who are trying to expand LGBTQ plus rights, including our trans American friends as well. We progressives must fight for farmers struggling to make ends meet just as hard as we'll fight for those struggling in our suburbs and in our cities. We progressives must fight against corporate lobbyists who are trying to persuade our state politicians at the expense of hardworking Michiganders. No, I am not blue MAGA, all right? So there will be some times that some Democrats listening to the show will get upset with me, like when I announced earlier in the year that I was voting uncommitted instead of Joe Biden in the presidential primary. However, I became pragmatic and I did vote for Kamala Harris because she was a lot better than Donald Trump. So I guess that also means there will be some progressives who might get frustrated when I say half is better than nothing, or sometimes being pragmatic is the best way forward. So I think I will make everyone mad from time to time. But my takes are intended to give my opinions at the time, the communication strategies progressives and Democrats should consider, and to ensure everyone has a good idea on the awful ideas shared from the weird right-wing world. That's what this podcast is about, advancing progressive ideals through discussion and through commentary, and I will continue to do just that in 2024. Remember, you can always email me, leftoflansing@gmail.com, and let me know whether or not you agree or disagree with whatever I say. And if you've got some ideas for a possible guest in the future, or if you think there's a topic that isn't really getting a whole lot of attention and you think maybe I should pay attention to it, please let me know by just emailing me, leftoflansing@gmail.com. Left of Lansing, by the way, is also on Blue Sky. Check out some of my stuff there because next year I will be posting more and more of my thoughts on Blue Sky, while I won't be posting as much on Elon's site. I will still have a presence there, but not like I used to always have. So find me on Blue Sky if you haven't done so already. And if you were on Blue Sky this week, you know I didn't really have many kind and fuzzy thoughts for the D.C. Democratic leadership, especially in the United States House. Why? Well, New York Progressive Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez fell short in her bid to become the ranking member of the powerful House Oversight Committee, and she lost to Virginia centrist Democrat Jerry Connolly. Now, to be honest with you, I've never been all that impressed by Jerry Connolly. I mean, he seems fine, but as a leader and as an effective communicator for the Democratic Party, he always seemed kind of meh. He always seemed kind of bland to me. Look, I'm sure he's probably a nice guy and is someone that I can agree with maybe, 75, 80% of the time. But when it comes to taking bold progressive stances that could serve as a way to show the entire working class that you're standing with them while Trump stands with the billionaires, Jerry Connolly is not exactly the first name that pops up in my head. And after this devastating loss that our side experienced this past election, in which not only are we getting Trump 2.0, but Republicans have slim majorities in both the U.S. House and the Senate, I would think the Democratic leadership would actually have put on their thinking caps and thought, hey, you know what? We need someone to shake up the party. We need somebody younger who can communicate with voters that we seem to be losing each year, like Gen X and millennials and Gen Z voters or Latino voters. I mean, we need to find someone who can communicate to older people on TV and to younger people on social media. We need new blood. We need new excitement. Maybe that's a pretty good idea. I mean, for as horrible as J.D. Vance is, everyone, he's a young face for the bro culture that's taking over the Republican Party. I'm not saying I want bro culture infesting progressivism or the Democratic Party, no, but I am saying we need someone who can speak to those voters that we are struggling to reach. I mean, I'm just echoing what the Michigan Democratic Party Rural Caucus Chair Mark Ludwig, who's running to become the next Michigan Democratic Party chair, said on this show last month. We have to keep expanding the party, and that's something that Democrats haven't really been doing the best job here for the last few elections. We have to talk to everyone out there. We have to talk to as many people as possible. I'm not saying you're going to turn MAGA voters around, and some of them are quite reprehensible, and we don't need to talk to them one bit. But there are a lot of people sitting on the sidelines thinking, both parties aren't working for me. That is who the Democrats should be going after. But here's the part that's irking many of us over this fight on who was going to become the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee between AOC and Jerry Connolly. When it appeared that AOC was lining up all the support and lining up all the votes she needed to win this position, Slate Magazine's Alexander Salmon put it this way. He says that then former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi entered the fray. The 84-year-old Pelosi, who suffered a fall while in Germany and had to have her hip replaced, fought AOC from overseas and fought to have one more victory by getting her 74-year-old pal from Virginia voted to become the ranking member of that Oversight Committee. Now, this position opened up so that the current ranking member, 61-year-old Jamie Raskin of Maryland, could become the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee from 74-year-old New Yorker Jerry Nadler. Oh, and 76-year-old Arizona Representative Raul Grijalva stepped down from his post as the ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee so that 60-year-old Californian Jared Huffman could grab that spot. And as Slate's Alexander Salmon wrote in that same story, in both cases, septuagenarians pass the torch to sexagenarians. Oh, man. Hey, you know what, though? I guess that's still going a little bit younger for Democrats, so give credit where credit's due, I suppose. But when Democrats had a beautiful opportunity to, as progressive writer and activist Digby posted on social media, send a shot across the bow, they failed, and they failed miserably by failing to nominate the 35-year-old AOC to become the vice chair of the Oversight Committee. Yep. Instead, Nancy Pelosi protected one of her own and ensured that Democrats represented the olds. I mean, maybe Democrats are playing some kind of three-dimensional chess, and maybe I'm just plain dumb about it. Maybe Democrats decided against picking the younger, vibrant, highly charismatic, and effective communicator like AOC for a 74-year-old man who's also dealing with throat cancer and who's another in the line of milquetoast geriatric leaders because they thought voters were saying this past election, please, do more of the same. Please give us more old Democrats in leadership positions. That's what we want. Please, everybody, all Democrats, keep doing that. As I said, Democrats gained fewer Latino and youth voters this past election, and AOC is popular with those voting groups. Naturally, congressional Democrats chose old man. Oh, and let's not forget that Connally also supported Pelosi's ridiculous pay-go rules from a decade ago, which enacted unneeded austerity on millions of Americans. At a time where there's such a populist fervor in America, let's go with those who think austerity is what the people want. Now, while I was making similar points on Blue Sky, some fellow progressives took issue with what I was saying and argued that it really doesn't matter because AOC will still have a huge megaphone, being who she is, of course, and that she'll still be a force on the Oversight Committee since Raskin's no longer there. Well, true. AOC won't have a difficult time getting on TV and on social media and taking bold progressive positions there. But since that is the case, why are old Democratic leaders joining together by sticking their heads in the sand and refusing to make AOC a literal leader of a party that is losing Gen X and Gen Z voters? Why? If this position is perfunctory and symbolic, then why did Pelosi and the rest of the geriatric centrist wing block AOC from the position in the first place? Doesn't make sense. Seems strange to me to spend time and energy blocking someone from a position that's apparently really not that important. Because the octogenarians cannot give up power, and the corporate donor base doesn't want to give up that power to a young progressive voice who is popular with the people. Say what you will about AOC's economic positions, and hey, I will love to debate them all the time on here, and sometimes I don't agree with some of her positions. However, I haven't heard many out there criticize her for her lack of preparation and questioning during committee testimony. She has always been stellar in that role. So, of course, let's not put her in the spotlight, right? And with a corrupt billionaire-backed Trump administration coming back for its sequel, wouldn't it have been nice to have AOC sitting right there as the vice chair, to sit there as the symbol of the Democratic Party calling out the corruption? She would have been the leader, a leader that signaled to voters that Democrats aren't just filled with old, middle-of-the-roaders. They would have seen a smart progressive populist taking on the billionaire establishment that is filling up the Trump world. Alas, it was not to be, and D.C. Democrats continue to be swayed by the 84-year-old Pelosi and the rest of the geriatric wing of the Democratic Party. This could have been a good story, really could have been a good story out of a bad year, could have been a great way to end a bad year, really could have, but no. And speaking of could have been, back here in Michigan, it appears the Democratic House leadership found ways to screw things up again. Okay, now I wanted to read this posting from good friend of the podcast and one hell of a progressive representative in the State House, Democrat Emily Devendorf. And the representative posted the following. I'm going to read this. A minimum expectation of a legislator is to come to work. Your schedule is not your own. You do the work of the people until the work is done. Your bosses are the Michigan Constitution and your constituents. If you want more flexibility, go into another profession. Now, you could really read the frustrations in between the lines there, can't you? I mean, there's been a lot of shenanigans happening inside the State House during this lame duck session, a session in which Democrats should have been spending their time passing major progressive legislation like polluter pay, paid sick leave, changes in the awful auto insurance, quote-unquote, reform law. They should have been passing bills for driver's licenses for immigrants, and also Devendorf's homeless Bill of Rights. Instead, Democrats wasted some of the lame duck passing yet another expensive and inefficient bout of corporate welfare. It just makes you want to bang your head. And this time they gave millions of dollars to Google, to Meta, and to Microsoft so that way they can build environmentally damaging data centers. Well, and hey, MAGA Republicans, all you guys say that you're all the populists. Well, you join them in that effort because giving the corporate donor base what it wants should always take precedence over the people, right? However, because MAGA Republicans are, of course, MAGA Republicans, incoming Speaker of the House, Matt Hall, instructed every Republican, by the way, after that data center bill vote, he then instructed every Republican to walk out of the House and refuse to take any votes on any other bills during this lame duck session. Ostensibly, it's because Matt Hall and the Republicans are angry that Democrats are actually doing, maybe, the right thing by not trying to water down the scheduled minimum wage hikes while slowly phasing out tipped wages. And Republicans also want to water down the scheduled paid sick leave, all of which begins in 2 months. Now, again, I thought Republicans suddenly found their populist wings and were ready to fly with them since they all sounded populist during the election. They cared about grocery prices. They cared about how much money people were making. Oh, but all of a sudden, once they get into power, no, it's how can we water down certain bills? How can we hurt people's wages? How can we hurt people and get rid of their paid sick leave? I mean, come on, they were all going to bring down inflation. They were going to do all this stuff. Oh, and by the way, wasn't it rich last week how Trump admitted there's really not much that he can do to bring down the price of groceries? You don't say. No kidding, Grandpa. But he will work together with the Republican majority in Congress to pay back all of those corporations who inflated their prices during the last few years with massive cuts in the corporate tax rate. I mean, what a populist agenda indeed. Give those who created greedflation more tax cuts because that's really speaking to the people, right? Where was I? Oh, right. Michigan Republicans have been working to screw over the working class as usual. Well, they decided to walk out of the House and refuse to vote on any more Democratic-backed bills because, again, screwing over the working class out of paid sick leave and higher wages, that is always going to be tops on their agenda. Still, that left Democrats in complete charge of their agenda. Democrats could still pass their agenda completely without the Republicans there until Detroit Democrat Karen Whitsett decided to walk out and no longer vote on anything else during this lame duck session, calling out House Speaker Joe Tate for his ineffectual leadership. Now, listen, if you've heard this podcast for a while, you know that I am not a big fan of Karen Whitsett's. You see, last year, she nearly imploded the Reproductive Health Care Act, in which State House Democrats really wanted to pass last year. That bill ended the practice of women having to buy rape insurance coverage, which was a separate insurance rider that women had to buy if they wanted an abortion. That bill ended that practice. That part of the bill did pass. That bill also ended the ban on dilation and extraction procedures, D&E procedures, that some mothers must undergo late in pregnancies due to some horrific complications and due to the health of the mother. The bill also ended the Republican trap laws, which made it harder on abortion providers by requiring them to go through stringent licensing requirements. So those parts of the Reproductive Health Care Act did pass. However, The original bill also included a ban on the Republican 24-hour waiting period, and it would have provided Medicaid coverage for those seeking abortion care. But Karen Whitsett refused to sign on to the bill, claiming that abortion coverage would take away Medicaid coverage from seniors. That was such a sick and ridiculous statement, and it was a blatant lie. However, it wasn't the first time Karen Whitsett would make such ridiculous claims, such as when she visited the Trump White House back in 2020. You remember that? And she sat there in the White House thanking Trump for hydroxychloroquine to treat her COVID symptoms. You remember that, right? You remember when the right wing believed in that unscientific claim that the drug cured COVID, and there was Karen Whitsett, a Democrat, going to the White House in 2020 saying, "Thank you, President Trump, for giving me a drug that in no way showed it cured COVID." So Karen Whitsett is out there. There are times that she's out there in La La Land. And now she's no longer voting on important legislation that could really help people. And going back to what Representative Emily Devendorf was complaining about, Whitsett's not in the House right now working for the people before the lame duck ends. There are so many people that could get help if Democrats would just pass some of these bills, if Karen Whitsett was there to pass them. And here's how Michigan Advance's Anna Liz Nichols wrote up the story on Karen Whitsett's leaving the State House and what it means for important bills like Emily Devendorf's Homeless Bill of Rights. And I'm quoting, "With all the support Whitsett has gotten for the issues important to her community, sponsor for the Homeless Bill of Rights, Representative Emily Devendorf, told media after the failed vote that they wished Whitsett would have supported other folks' communities. I would like to think that my supporting Representative Whitsett's community and her bill to fund the needs of a senior center could be reciprocated in supporting homelessness in my community. But more so, I wish we all could recognize that this is an issue in all of our communities, that this helps all of us, and it is not a trade when we're voting on helping folks access their most basic needs," Devendorf said. "It is truly just ensuring that those who are suffering, struggling the most in Michigan get the attention they need, and that we don't always prefer the policy interests of those who have the most power." Anna Liz Nichols continues here in her story. Whitsett pointed the finger at her fellow Detroiter House Speaker Joe Tate for some of the chaos on Friday, telling Gongwer News Service on Sunday that the best thing to happen for House Democrats under his tenure is for the party to lose the majority. "The only thing that came out of this was that he was the first black Speaker of the House, nothing else," Whitsett told Gongwer. Wow. Okay, look, this sucks, and it sucks for the state of Michigan. Don't get me wrong. MAGA Republicans are loving this, and I even read one writer congratulate Karen Whitsett on stopping Democrats on her own. The Republicans couldn't stop them, but hey, they loved it that it seems like Karen Whitsett is stopping Democrats all by herself. However, there might be some truth to Whitsett's frustrations with Joe Tate. Democratic State Representative Joey Andrews of St. Joseph echoed similar sentiments on social media, and I'm going to read this if you don't mind. He says, "Karen is 100% correct. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll boil it down to here. Joe Tate's one remarkable success was uniting liberals and conservatives, labor and business, environmentalists and corporations, and being happy to see his tenure end." And he also continued to say that Tate lacks the quality of leadership needed to motivate Democrats, leading to fecklessness, indecision, and indifference. All right, so there's another Democrat. And we know that our good friend, Progressive Democratic State Representative Betsy Kafia, hasn't been real quiet about her frustrations with Joe Tate and the House leadership. Kafia even shared text messages last week between her and House Speaker Tate from a year ago. And according to Jordan Hermani of Bridge Magazine, in the texts, Kafia said that she was disappointed the chamber had not yet held votes on a number of bills, including hate crime legislation, mental health insurance coverage, work protections for nurses, and more. "What is the majority for?" Kafia wrote in a text to Tate. According to screenshots that Kafia took of their discussion, "Why are those of us who fight for them treated like a problem and punished? For God's sake, who the hell are we?" I think that's a great question. And I think that's what Democrats, Michigan Democrats, and Democrats across the country had better figure out and figure out fast. Because with billionaire fascism about to grasp control of our federal government in a month, Democrats had better learn quick that the old way of doing business ain't working. And now you've got the Detroit News reporting that a DT Energy nonprofit gave some $100,000 to a fund linked to House Speaker Joe Tate amid that whole power outage anger from a year ago. I mean, I talked about the anger from those outages about 18 months ago. And while that was all happening, House Speaker Joe Tate is accepting $100,000 from DTE Energy. That's not working for the people, Joe. Remember, Detroiters, this guy wants to run for mayor in your city. Please remember the name, Joe Tate. I mean, look at who Joe's busy courting and who he's not busy courting. Now, look, I understand. Many of you are probably listening and wondering, where's the Pat Johnston who takes the battle to them being MAGA Republicans? I mean, they're the worst of the worst, and why aren't we battling them? It seems like we're battling each other right now because, I'll just say this, unless we understand our next course of action, unless we learn from the horrific mistakes that Democrats made in this election, unless we show that we will fight for all families, unless we show that we'll fight just as hard for those who are trying to get their kids into college or a vocational school, and unless we show that we care more about the people rather than corporate backers, then we are in a world of hurt. And it won't get much better in 2 years when we've got another election. Oh, and don't worry. When I come back to talk to you after the new year, we know right-wing dingbat MAGA extremists are going to be up to no good once they get control of the state house. And I will have lots and lots to say about them. I will highlight their atrocities, and I will also talk about how they're trying to hurt working people, how they're trying to hurt people that they've been trained not to like, and how they're trying to hurt our democracy. You don't have to worry about that. I will keep my eye on what the Republicans are doing in Lansing, but unless we get our deck in order, unless we understand the values that we're fighting for, and unless we realize that we've got to recapture our progressive populist ways, and also unless we realize we always have to fight for those who can't pay for lobbyists to fight for themselves, then we are going to be stuck with MAGA clowns like Matt Hall setting some of their awful agenda into motion. We've got to change course. You're listening to LOL.
He spent nearly 25 years working as a liberal voice in conservative talk radio across the state, and he's still a somewhat stable person. It's the Left of Lansing podcast with Pat Johnston. You can find archives of the podcast, plus Pat's musings on other topics in written form at leftoflansing.com. Left of Lansing archives are available wherever you get your podcasts. And now Left of Lansing is available on YouTube. We'd like to thank Audio Boom for distributing all our episodes so we can share progressive, otherwise known as common sense, values across Michigan and the country. Now, here's Pat Johnston.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Left of Lansing. Remember, you can always contact me during the holiday break. And hey, let me know what books you're reading or new books that you're reading. I'm going to finish a couple of books during the next few weeks. And once I'm finished, I'll share them with you on leftoflansing.com, Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, and the Gram after the new year. Please have a safe holiday season. Be merry, but most of all, be smart. And Lions fans, don't despair. Yes, they're dealing with many, many injuries. They look like a mash unit, but they'll still give it a good go here in the playoffs. And regardless, they'll have a better and healthier team next year. I mean, the law of averages says that they will have a healthier team next year, right? I hope so. Have a great holiday. Have a good new year. And I'll talk with you again on January the 8th. Until then, take the battle to them. Thank you, Michigan.
The Left of Lansing podcast was produced by Pat Johnston, written by Pat Johnston, researched by Pat Johnston, edited by Pat Johnston, and hosted by, yes, Pat Johnston. Technical assistance by Dr. Heather. And thanks to our good friend Kirsten for the awesome podcast logo. Remember to visit leftoflansing.com for more news and information. Thanks again for listening to the Left of Lansing podcast.